So it was a better season than season 1, I would say. Hi guys, I am back. First of all, I'm Sierra from Dear Sierra. Welcome. I'm back to do a, I guess like a recap, kind of review of season 2 of Degrassi Next Class. I introduced most of the characters in season 1, the ones that had like huge storylines. So in season 2, starting off hot, Frankie, which again, Frankie Hollingsworth, she's Miles Hollingsworth's little sister and best friends with Shay and Lola. She does some really racist ass shit on the first episode. I had to go back and watch the clip actually to make sure that like I was like grasping it correctly and like seeing like at what level it really was. Basically, she draws all the team members of the opposite team, like the opposing team, volleyball team. Their nickname is like the zoo or whatever. So she draws a picture of them as zoo animals, most notably gorillas. So very, very, yeah. Just for the record, Shay is the only really black girl on Next Class. She's also best friends with Frankie prior to this. And Shay was not a part of this. She was not involved in this at all. She does find out about it after the fact. Shay raises a huge talking point by telling Frankie, hey, you, Frankie, you can afford financially and socially and legally to get into a little bit of trouble with this because you're rich. But I, Shay, cannot afford to get into trouble for this because I'm not rich. I need to be in volleyball. I can't afford to sit out for a season. I can't afford to get suspended. I can't afford for scouts to not come to our games because our name is tainted, because I need volleyball for scholarships so I can go to college, because I can afford to go to some elite training camp in the summer for volleyball. I can afford for my parents to pay for college. So Shay raises a huge talking point by telling Frankie, you can afford this literally and figuratively. I cannot afford this because you're rich. I'm not rich. I wish Shay would have taken it a step further and called a spade and said, not only can you afford this because you're rich and I'm not, you can afford this because you're white and I'm black. That's where she should have taken it. But baby steps. She's still like having her like awakening to like the fact that I'm black. My friends are not black. So I get it. I'm happy with that discourse that they had. Shay does get some more balls. She tells Frankie, you telling them you're sorry that they're offended is basically the same thing as you shooting someone in the leg and telling them I'm sorry that you have blood on your pants. And I was like, that is a bar, because she told her basically, you telling them I'm sorry I offended you is not an apology, and don't think that it is. So she called her out, and I really appreciated that. Eventually, Frankie does get kicked off of the volleyball team, even though she has like some different like ideas and plans to kind of like win people over. They don't really work essentially, and she is off the volleyball team for most of the entire season 2 of the show. Miles is going off to private school at the beginning of the season 2, which they're actually having him go off to Vanderbilt Prep, which is kind of a shout out to Declan and Fiona, because Declan and Fiona from Next Generation went to Vanderbilt Prep before they came to Degrassi. But then he realizes that he wants to stick around to support Hunter, who's still struggling with all the aftermath of the school shooting lockdown thing. Hunter, homeboy crashed a car intentionally. So that's definitely worth taking seriously. And that's when Miles realized like, hey, like, all the drama with our parents and all the drama with everything else, like Hunter really needs me to be a big brother to him, blah, 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 whatever. Miles is staying at Degrassi, false alarm. You would think this would make Tristan happy because then they can finally like be together, be at the same school. They just like kind of like finally got together-ish, but now they can actually explore their relationship without Miles like going away for school. Hunter goes to an inpatient facility, or maybe it was like a day program or something. It was why they made it seem on camera. But whatever. I forgot to mention like more about Zoe and Grace kissing and more about them like having a pretty tight relationship in general. Like Zoe, Grace, and Zig are like a pretty tight group kind of in season 1 of Next Class, and that kind of carries over. And then also Zoe is aware that Grace has cystic fibrosis. Zoe was the only one up until this point that knew. I actually personally connected with that story because I had a friend that had cystic fibrosis when I was growing up. So I understand like the battle and all of like the minor things you need to take into consideration when you're dealing with cystic fibrosis. Yael, the redheaded girl that's kind of like in Hunter's little clique, she starts this app that goes viral pretty quickly. Basically it's, so it's called like High School Secrets, I think. It's basically like a Yik Yak or like a whisper app thing where it's like people can say things about like common topics, but it's anonymous, I'm pretty sure. Tristan and Miles, like I mentioned briefly before, they're kind of like touch and go this whole season, and Tristan's kind of like tiptoeing around Miles because Miles like has so many other like things he's mentally preoccupied with, but Tristan's also trying to like see where the relationship is going, but Miles doesn't really have like the mental capacity or energy or attention span to give their relationship the attention that it needs. And sex is like a really touchy topic with him as well. Winston, who is Frankie's ex-boyfriend at this point, I think, the Asian guy that's best friends with Miles, he's putting on a play of some sort. Zoe wants to be in the play, and she's like super overly confident that she's gonna get cast in like one of the lead roles for the play because she knows that Winston used to have a crush on her. Again, this is a theme with Zoe where she kind of is overly confident in the fact that people are attracted to her when they may not be or may not be anymore. Esme beats her and Zoe's jealous and asks Esme for pointers, and then somehow Esme and Zoe end up kissing. That happens. So this is Zoe's second time kissing a girl, so Zoe must really like girls then, right? Miles, of all people, gives Zoe advice about coming to terms with her sexual preference and orientation and all of that. It's really interesting that that information is coming from Miles to Zoe. But it's fair because he was in a similar position where he didn't know that he was into guys until his one exception, which was Tristan. And then Zoe feels like her one exception was Grace, but now maybe it's not Grace because she also kissed Esme, so who knows. Then Zoe, after kissing her second girl, does a whole 180 and makes a move on Winston. And then all of a sudden, like immediately after her kissing Winston, they decide that they're boyfriend and girlfriend out of thin air. Do you remember how fast relationships were like started in high school and middle school? You could literally text someone for like 15 minutes and then you were boyfriend and girlfriend. You could literally kiss someone for 2 seconds and then you were boyfriend and girlfriend. But let's also remember how fast relationships ended. Like that, okay? Zoe ends up self-harming and posting like very, very emo stuff on basically what their equivalent of Instagram is at the time. Like very emo stuff. And I'm not trying to like be like making light of her self-harm or like stuff that she's posting online, but it is like very like, it happens so fast on the show. It's like 1 minute she's Zoe and 1 minute she's like, I don't know, like I like girls like boys, and next minute, you know, she's like posting like depressing ass posts and like broken hearts and bandaged wrists and stuff on her social media. So it happens very fast and it's very dramatized in the show, but I'm not making light of it by any means. So Zoe shows up at this party in the woods where Grace has been drinking and Grace has passed out, and everyone's kind of like, oh, like she'll be fine, she's passed out, we don't want to get in trouble for us being underage drinking, so we're not going to do anything about Grace being passed out. But then Zoe is like, I'm the only person that knows she has cystic fibrosis. So then Zoe's like, no, something could really be medically wrong with her that has nothing to do with the alcohol, so we need to take her to a hospital. Zoe does continue to self-harm more throughout the season after this point, until eventually in the season finale, she's able to come out to Winston, tell him she likes girls, and then they agree to be friends. So that's Zoe's story. Lots of race relations in season 2 of Degrassi Next Class, to be honest. Basically, at the beginning of the season, Tiny is suspended for fighting, basically because there was a guy that was pursuing Lola. And so in like support of Tiny, Lola organizes this protest for him because she believes that he's being unjustly suspended from school, basically. Because the other person, I guess, involved didn't get suspended, or other people have done similar things and didn't get suspended. So she goes to like vouch for him in that way. Around the halfway mark of the season, the protests is what interferes with like this like Degrassi gala thing, which is basically like an alumni event that Tristan is throwing, because Tristan, again, is like doing his like student council thing. And a lot of OG like next generation Degrassi members show up for this like alumni day gala thing, which again takes place the same day as the protest that Lola organizes. There were so many cameos from next generation people. Paige, Marco, Sav is there, Peter's there, Holly J, even Craig and Liberty. I wasn't expecting Emma and Spinner to be there, but Emma and Spinner are there as well. Emma actually gets asked by Lola, like, hey, I heard you were that girl that like took your top off at the protest when you went to Degrassi. Spinner and Paige give Frankie advice because Frankie is kind of like feeling like she's done whatever she thinks she can do to kind of like get back in good graces with people thinking that she's a racist. And Paige and Spinner at separate points are both kind of like, we all made mistakes when we were high school students at Degrassi, but we all survived them and like came out on the other side of them, so you'll be okay kind of thing. So Frankie kind of like gets shamed away from the gala altogether. Like she tries to go there, I think like perform a song or something, but she's still kind of shamed. There's a protest going on outside and she's brought up again as far as like being a racist. She runs away with Jonah. I cannot wait for Jonah to graduate, y'all. She runs away with Jonah. I cannot wait for Jonah to graduate, y'all. Her and Jonah go to some motel. She steals Jonah's car. But again, there will not be a police report because a little white girl will not get the police called on her for stealing someone's car. When she's in this like random neighborhood, I think she has like a flat tire or something, and then a black guy pulls over to help her and he approaches her car and she like totally just by instinct locks her car doors, and then she's like, oh shit, am I actually racist because I locked my car doors? Going back to the volleyball team and the race relation stuff, jumping into what Shay is doing this season, she's basically asked to like denounce her affiliation with like the protests and everything, because remember Lola was doing the protests for racism and Shay involved herself in that, rightfully so. But she's basically told like, hey, there's like this really elite volleyball camp that wants to have you be a part of it basically, but you need to write a letter saying that you are sorry for being a part of that protest. Now again, if there were more black characters on the show or like in her circle specifically, I feel like it would have been a much easier decision for her, because she would have other people like validating her, like, girl, like, no, this is us, like, this is our identity, this is who we are. But because all of her friends are white and she exists in so many white spaces, I feel like that was why it was such a hard decision for her to make. And she's already kind of like that. Now that doesn't excuse her for for stepping down and like giving up, but it lends her perspective because she's the black girl at Degrassi and she's the black girl in all of her friend groups and circles. So denouncing her alliance to civil rights and social justice just seems like the easier peacemaking decision, because she's gonna have to continue to exist in all these spaces every single day. And she's already proven multiple times that she kind of like puts her friends before her constantly. I mean, she told Lola that she could have her man just because she was like a little bit nervous. So that goes to show that she is constantly just like being a doormat and letting her friends do whatever, or like letting whatever makes the climate the most bearable is what she's going to choose to do. And even though Lola and Tyler of all people tell Shay not to write that letter apologizing for the protest, she ends up doing it and giving the letter to her coach. Immediately after giving the letter to her coach, a bunch of the students like Winston and Lola and randoms tell Shay like, oh, you really inspired us, like, we're so glad that you stood up to the police officers at the protest, because there were police that came to the protest and Shay stood up to them. I forgot to mention that. So these kids are telling her like, Shay, like, we were inspired by you, like what you did was the right thing. And then she starts having like internal second thoughts about turning in the letter and stuff like that. That's all cute and all, that all these students are inspired by Shay because she stood up to the police, but none of y'all asses were inspired enough or had the balls enough to stand up to police yourselves, even though you know that the consequences would have been much lighter for you. But I digress. Maya is jealous of Zig being close with Grace, even though I'm pretty sure they're like still officially broken up. But he's always been close with Grace. And again, Zig and Maya don't know that Grace has cystic fibrosis, but Zig is naturally close with Grace and he always has been. Maya is still having like music industry drama, basically. VJ, who is one of the guys that's friends with Hunter, that I can't remember his name earlier, he remixes her song without her permission and like puts it on like basically the equivalent of YouTube, and it blows up, and she asks him to take it down and he says no. I mean, everyone on the show is like pretty immature and has like very underdeveloped brains, so of course he doesn't take it down. And then Zig also becomes cool with Esme out of nowhere, which is really, really weird. I mean, it's understandable because Zig does have like a very soft interior and feels sorry for people very easily, but that's like a weird friendship that I didn't even peep developing. Tiny, I didn't talk about him yet. Basically, besides being the suspended black guy, Tiny has some relationship issues with Lola this season. Basically, Lola is on this dating app because she's still a little bit insecure about Tiny getting bored of her or leaving her eventually or whatever. And the dating app that she's on is literally called Tinder. Tinder. Like, I cannot make this up. They cannot make this up. Tinder, y'all. So Lola, I think Lola is adorable, okay? Like, she was one of my favorite Next Class characters, like, hands down. And that's saying a lot because I don't even like most of them. I like maybe 3 Next Class characters across the board, and she's one of my favorite ones. So that's saying a lot. I think she's adorable. She means well. She's a little bit insecure and a little bit inexperienced, which when people look at her appearance-wise, I think they probably assume that she's not inexperienced, especially like romantically and sexually, but she is. But she's just so adorable to me, and she's a sweet, well-intentioned girl, like all around, I think, honestly. Lola starts feeling discouraged about like Tiny like being mad at her about the whole dating app thing, and then Grace basically like gives her like a whole like 5-minute crash course on race relations, and that's when Lola gets the idea for the protest that we've already talked about this season. And then Tiny wants to go to like some science camp or something, and then Shay like encourages him and is like, oh yeah, I'll help you like apply for the science camp or whatever. Eventually Tiny like officially moves on from Lola, and he makes a move on Shay, and then towards the tail end of the season, it's like right before like the big like volleyball game or whatever, Tiny encourages Shay to ask Lola for permission to date Tiny the same way that Lola asked Shay for permission to date Tiny in season 1. And ain't it just like a man to like send the woman into the lion's den, send the woman into the fire to like do the dirty work, which is like, anyway. So Shay asks Lola, and Lola says no, which is funny as fuck to me because Shay asked Lola for the like blessing for her to date Tiny now, and Lola says no. And I don't blame Lola one bit, because that's what Shay gets for giving that man away to begin with. And not only that, Shay asks Lola a yes or no question, which gives Lola the right to either answer yes or no. And she took that right and she said no, which I love. Like, I have no sympathy for Shay in this scenario. I was so hype, and I'm like so geeked at Lola's straight face telling Shay no. Normally, like, I would root for Black love and all of that, but Shay should have said it with her chest in season 1, and she did it, so she got what she got. The season ends with the girls' volleyball game. Spoiler, they win the game. Shay is like, got my friends back, I got my game back, whatever. Frankie did play in the game, I believe. And then there was a whole school bus load of kids that were supposed to arrive at the game because it was an away game, I assume, and like they were chartering a bus to get students to go to the away game, whatever. The game done started and ended and whatever. They won the trophy, and this whole busload full of kids is still not there. And then it's revealed that their school bus crashed. And Tiny was on the bus, Tristan was on the bus, Maya was on the bus. I think Winston and Miles were not on the bus, because I'm pretty sure Miles arrived at the school, at the game, and was like, where's Tristan, and whatever. So that's where the season ends, is with the school bus being in a bus crash. Shay, Frankie, and Lola are friends-ish, even though Lola doesn't give Shay permission to date Tiny. Zig is becoming close with Esme. Tristan and Miles are kind of like in a weird spot right now. That's basically it. With this season, it was very like race relations heavy, like I said, and sometimes it was like very on the nose, but I get it. This came out in like what, 2016, so I guess it would be like appropriate. Again, I have to like keep removing myself from the situation. Remember, the like continuation series of Next Class is very much catered to Gen Z children, not millennials, so it's digestible in a very different way. This season I really liked Lola, honestly, even though she did the whole dating app thing, and she kind of was like a little too naive in her like social justice civil rights bag. This is kind of like where I kind of began to like be, not that I wanted Zig to be with Maya, but I didn't want Zig to be with anyone as like bad as Esme, you know. I kind of would have rather him like either be single and just be a bro, or like be with someone that you knew that he truly cared about, you know, like, because he cared very deeply for Maya. Maya I don't want to say she was irrelevant this season, but her problems were very like pale in comparison to the problems of everyone else this season, as far as Tiny, and as far as Frankie, and as far as like Shay even, and Grace even. Zoe is kind of like coming to terms with like a very important thing in her life as well. I feel like Zoe didn't have a lot of people on her team. She was on a lot of other people's team, but she didn't really have like a one go-to person. I mean, Tristan was there for her ish. Miles gave his 2 cents from like a weird perspective. But you kind of see everyone kind of like switching teams almost, whether that be like sexually and romantically switching teams, or like switching teams as far as like what their values are and like what they choose over their friends, which is very, very interesting. I think that is a theme that we see throughout all Degrassi franchises, is kind of deciding where to draw the line between like your values and your friendships, because you can stand up for someone and you can say love conquers all and friendship is powerful and loyalty is powerful, but deciding like, is this a friend for life or is this a friend for now kind of thing, and kind of seeing where those cards kind of shuffle. You know, naturally through high school, you start out with one group of friends, you might transition through 3 different groups of friends. But the people you started freshman year with might not be the people that you in senior year with. Hopefully it's still a combination of some of those people that you picked up along the way, but it becomes, in the moment, it feels like life or death. It feels very much like betrayal. It feels very much like switching teams, basically, essentially. But when you look back at it in retrospect, you're like, okay, like this was just our growing pains that we truly had to grow through, and kind of learning, picking up little pieces of your own identity along the way, like building yourself as a person and seeing who that person is becoming and who is aligned with who that person is becoming, and who is your friend and who is your partner and who is your ally, as you grow all these different layers of yourself and possibly shed some layers too. So I think at the root of it, it had all of the Degrassi elements as far as self-discovery and exploration and friendships and things like that, but it's translated in a very different way. So it was a better season than season 1, I would say. Even though all of the topics were very on the nose, I understand why they were on the nose given who they are marketing these seasons to. So that is my like very, very quick review of season 2 of Degrassi Next Class, and I will see you guys soon in my season 3 review and recap of Degrassi Next Class.